The program called What's Going On FlintTalkRadio.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program, and we are in the third week of the month. That means that Miss Catherine Hunter Williams, our co-hostess at the studio, is not here during this time, but will be here next week, and we will be looking forward to that. I want to say hi to Catherine out there, though. I know she's watching the program, and want to commend her for the fine job she's doing with the study group over at Page's Bookstore on 2nd Street here in downtown Flint. We had a wonderful meeting last time, and we are getting out of this book and going to another book. In the study group that's 8 years old right now, and want to invite all of you out there in the listenership to come out there and join with us at Page's Bookstore and come and join the study group and also the conversation and the fellowship that we have there, because we're having some very good times, got new members, and we're looking forward to growing and expanding in the next 2 years. So by the time we get to a decade of standing strong and staying focused on what we're doing, trying to bring studying back into the centerness of the community. And by the 10th year, we hope to have a large crowd of people that's actively engaging in reading and studying books, attacking information, not attacking each other, and trying to grow the idea that readers are leaders, and if you're not reading, you probably not going to be leading too many people. So that's what we are. So Catherine, I want to thank you for the fine job that you're doing. Today we're going to come and talk about a couple of things on FlintTalkRadio.com. Our spin on something going on around the papacy. As you know, the Pope is going to be installed in his office as the Pope. Francis, the new Pope, who came into his own because of the unusual resignation. This is very unusual because we have had a Pope that resigned from his papacy in 600 years, and this is a very rare occasion. But never fear. Pope Francis is here. And Pope Francis will be officially installed tomorrow. But let me just tell you what I read right before coming to the studio that really raised a lot of interesting questions. And that is, John, do you know who Robert Mugabe is?
Mugabe. Is that the guy who is the president or the leader of that African nation that's really he's really anti-white? Zimbabwe, is it? Or?
Yeah, Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
I can never trick. I ask these questions right off. We don't practice it before we go on the air, and I'm always trying to stunt. Stun John into silence, but he seems to have all the answers. I talk to him off camera, and I'm always asking questions, see if he's up to speed, and he's up to speed. He's up to speed. But he's not just a camera person here and a technician in the studio. He's also a person that's well read. And you're exactly right about this Robert Mugabe. I tell you something. I have to tell you in the listening audience, the reason I bring his name up is because the reports just came out that Robert Mugabe has slipped into Italy and will be there for the coronation tomorrow. And if you know anything about Robert Mugabe, you know that he's persona non grata in Europe, and that means that they're not pulling out the red carpet and telling him to come on down and visit at any time at your leisure. And so he comes into Italy, and of course the Pope didn't introduce anybody. The Pope didn't invite anybody to the festivities, to the coronation, but he has not also disinvited anybody. And so Mugabe, who was there for the funeral services of Pope John Paul, and I think he was there in 2005, and I was there for the inauguration, I think, of John Paul as well. So nobody is, in fact, not allowed to attend, but they don't send out invitations. And this is how he was able to go in there, I guess getting off the plane and going right into a limousine that was waiting for him that had been sent there by the papacy and he'll be there for that particular ceremony. It is really interesting when you think about it that this man can leave the country and nobody will, in fact, rise up and try to throw him out of power, because there's no way that Robert Mugabe is president by the people who have installed him in office, because I know the kind of leadership he's been given since 1980 when he took over from the British, from Ian Smith and those persons that had vacated what was formerly called Southern Rhodesia. And now we have to deal, after they left, then we get Mugabe in there. And Mugabe is, some people have said, and people in Zimbabwe are saying that Mugabe is worse than Smith, as if that's possible. But anyway, he's in breaking news here. He's in Italy. And what is really interesting about it is that he can leave Zimbabwe and nobody rises up in his absence and overthrow him. That is quite interesting too. When I was in South Africa, I think I was saying that when I was in South Africa, that I was in a workshop, in a seminar involving a lot of college instructors, and Mugabe's name came up. The minister that was over the redistribution of land in South Africa in the aftermath of apartheid was trying to act as if he didn't know what Mugabe was doing right next door, because Zimbabwe is right in the vicinity of South Africa, north, and he was trying to act as if he didn't know that Mugabe was up there with his boot on the neck of those people who live in Zimbabwe. And I was listening to him until he got through, and he kept trying to accommodate Mugabe and saying he was this and that and great leader and all of that. I took it for as long as I could. I mean, I waited until he finished. But as soon as he finished, I raised my hand politely. In fact, he was standing right next to me. That's where he was giving his presentation. We were all at this, all the instructors and professors from these colleges around the country were in this workshop, in this seminar, this 2-week seminar on South Africa's history. And he was standing right next to me as he gave his presentation. I'm sitting over to his right. And after he finished, I raised my hand and I said to him, because I'm kind of I'm probably the most unconventional person. I was the most unconventional person that was sitting there in the workshop. Everybody else kept their mouth closed. And I raised my hand and I said, you've talked about Mugabe and that he was a statesman and a lot of laudatory things you said about him. I said, let me tell you what I think about Mugabe. And I said that I think that Mugabe is despicable. I said, I find that Mugabe is contemptible. I'm contemptuous of Mugabe. And went on and gave my little 5 cents of why I feel that everything that the speaker had said was disingenuous. And now he had been talking about Mugabe all throughout his talk. When I raised the level of the conversation to the point where I was saying something different than what he said, he was now going to tell me and tell the rest of them he didn't come there to talk about Mugabe. And he got really hysterical almost, and standing over me and saying, I didn't come here to talk about Mugabe. Well, he was talking about Mugabe the whole time he was up there. He didn't expect anybody to countermand what he was talking about Mugabe, and I was not going to sit there and take it, knowing the way he was saying it was untrue. And when he was, in fact, doing all that hollering, I was sitting there moving my head, because I was letting him know he didn't intimidate me, although he did intimidate the rest of the people that were there, because they started pushing the chairs back. And then, from that point forward, while we still had about another 12 days left in the seminar, and I couldn't get anybody to sit with me at that point. In fact, one of the presenters that evening was sitting in that particular workshop that morning, and after that session was over, we had about a 30-minute break between the two sessions. She asked me where was I from, and I told her, and what university, and I told her what university. And she said, you have a lot of courage. And she said, because I thought that he was going to smack you one. I said, yes, and if he had smacked me one, I was going to smack him one back. I was moving my head. As he was talking, I was moving my head because I knew what he was saying was not true. And if I have to stand up on the truth and get smacked for it, that's what's going to happen. But I'm going to do some smacking myself. But, I mean, I'm not turning the other cheek unless you got 15 with you and I'm a single person. Then I got another another tactic that I use. But that wasn't going to happen. But Mugabe being there says a lot to me because I know how that part of Africa operates, having been there a number of times and was in South Africa, in that part of Africa in 2000 and I think that was 2007. And I plan to be back there, as a matter of fact, this summer. But it's really interesting that Mugabe is in Italy right now and felt comfortable enough to have left Zimbabwe because the way these dictatorships operate is that when the leader leaves, then the rumblings begin to reverberate undercurrent because there are a lot of people who are, in fact, affected negatively by their leadership, even in the command posts. They understand they can't speak out against the leader. They would jeopardize their safety and their security and that of their family. So they tend not to rise up while the leader is present. When he leaves the country, then another thing begins to kick in. That is, all of those persons that are fearful of saying anything in his presence begin to incubate coups and things of that sort, trying to undermine and maybe even overthrow the person in his absence. That's happened a number of times in Africa. But Mugabe feels comfortable in going out of the country, and it's really interesting. It says a lot to me about what's happening inside that country. He can leave like he does without even having to worry about coming back to a country where he has been overthrown. That's interesting to me because I remember reading in 1966 when Kwame Nkrumah left Ghana and was going to go to Hanoi. He was going to visit North Vietnam during the height of the Vietnam War, and he was going to go there, of course, being a socialist and show solidarity. I guess he was up there to meet Jane Fonda, but to show solidarity with the Vietnamese and to tell them in the name of Ho Chi Minh to continue to fight and so on and so forth. But while he was going to Hanoi, he stopped off in Beijing and was in Beijing to rest before he made the final leg of his trip to Hanoi in North Vietnam. And while he was en route, he had not heard the news. The news was that in his absence, there was a coup d'etat that had already been waged against him. And then when he left the country, they rose up, the military rose up and overthrew Nkrumah, overthrew his government. Those who were the ministers left there were taken out of power. The people who were there from the United States and were part of the some of those who had gone, quote, unquote, back to Africa, Nkrumah had told blacks, come home. And some blacks, thinking that they weren't at home, went over there and found out they weren't home over there either, but were home here, but had to go learn that, went over there. And when they were through Nkrumah, they went around those blacks up and put them on a plane and sent them back over here. But when Nkrumah arrived in China, if you remember the story, the Chinese, the Asians are kind of, they're very polite. And they didn't want to tell Nkrumah that he had been overthrown. Nkrumah was tired and had traveled, thousands of miles and so on. And you're over here in Asia now, and you left Africa, and you've been overthrown. But they don't want to tell him that when he first arrives in Beijing. So they let him rest and let him get his nap. Then when Nkrumah woke up, they went to Nkrumah's room. And they said, Mr. President, we have some very bad news for you, and that news is that you have been overthrown. And Nkrumah sat up and said, what? He said, yes, Mr. President, you have been overthrown. There is a coup, a military coup that's occurred in your country. and Nkrumah sent one of his ministers back to Africa. Supposedly, he was going to go to Addis Ababa, where the OAU was being held, the Organization of African States, and they were going to African Unity, and they're going to appeal to this country to intervene because these African nations are supposed to be looking out for the welfare of Africa, and Nkrumah was supposed to be this savior of Africa, coming back from the United States, had been in England, and now he's going to come back to Africa with this Pan-African idea, and we're going to liberate Africa from the Europeans and all of this. And so Nkrumah just couldn't believe that they would not rise up in his name because of what he represented in terms of his idea. Not recognizing the idea was more in the West than it was in Africa, by the way. And the person he sent back, who was Saki, who was his closest aide, he sent to Addis Ababa, that he thought was going to go to Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, and he thought he was going to go there and make an appeal on behalf of Kwame Nkrumah. What happened was that Saki went to Accra in Ghana, and when he got there, he joined the revolution. Well, so that tells me something there, and about Nkrumah. But it tells me something also about Mugabe, because Mugabe, who is a strong-arm leader in Zimbabwe, can leave and nothing happens. Let me see as a comparison. Let me see Assad leave right now in Syria and see what happens. And I like to see what happens if Kim Jong-un, the one that's standing by the mountain this weekend. Did you see him had binoculars? And he's standing up on top of the mountain. He's got binoculars on, and he just is daring some planes to be in the air. And he's going to stop them single hand. I guess he's going to swat them down, knock them out of the air.
People don't know this, but there's always shooting across the border. I mean, in the DMZ area between North and South Korea, there's always sporadically, there's somebody takes a shot at somebody else on the other side. I mean, my brother-in-law was up there in the 80s. He was over in Korea. He was stationed in the army over there, and it happens a lot. I mean, there's tensions are pretty thick. You can actually cut it with a knife on the proverbial. Yeah,
the tensions are thick there between the North and South, but that is a different story in terms of that can be kind of so you have plausible deniability when you have somebody going off. You can always claim this is not something the state has ordered. That's just sporadic, and that's just people acting on their own. You can always have that kind of denial. But when you are talking in the tone that Kim Jong-un was talking in last week, a couple of weeks ago, that's the state talking, and that's nothing but wolf tickets, because that you can't deny that you said it. And if you act on it, then there's going to be some other kinds of consequences. But he's up there with the binoculars, and
Isn't it bizarre too? The communist countries always rebelled against their kingships and monarchies and privilege and rank and all that stuff. And then when you had in Cuba, the Castro brothers just exchanged a country and from one hand to the other. Same thing in Korea. Basically, it becomes like a legacy for the family to run. Mm-hmm. And so there's no difference between that, a king, a queen, or whatever.
No.
But yeah, the left on this country, and this country still. Right over there, they won't even acknowledge that's going on.
Yeah, it's these are dictators, that's in your face dictators. But you have some other kinds of dictators like Chavez, and who was a dictator also. And Chavez's dictatorship was that he had the poor people to vote on a referendum to change the Constitution, so that he's not going to be a strong military leader, a junta kind of leader that takes over militarily and dare them to say anything. What he does is get them to endorse his dictatorship. And so because they're voting for it, they think they're not really being ruled by a dictator who refuses to leave. But what he does is that he gets to stay there forever because they have changed the Constitution. If he's out, and once you do that, by the way, even if they lose the election, because they have elections, then they can just simply claim that they won the election. That's how Mugabe stays in power. Mugabe lost the last election. He's still there in Zimbabwe, and the person that won, Mugabe was gracious enough to share the leadership with this person. But can you imagine somebody telling you that they're going to pass the country off to their brother, as Castro did, or in the case of Kim Jong Un, he inherits the country from his father.
Well, but it's so ironic. I mean, I think the irony is lost to most people. It's like the communists always talked about how they hated the privilege, they hated the oppressiveness of monarchies and the kings, and how that was what they're trying to avoid with communism and everybody's equal. Well, I've never seen that manifested in any communist regime. There's such an elite that is so far above everybody else. Everybody's living in squalor. They travel, they live well. But no, see, they decry capitalism because there's not such a great distribution of wealth. But if you look at it as a whole of capitalist countries, most people have running water, toilets.
Yeah.
They have electricity.
That's true.
Look at what their countries have, the communist countries.
You know, you're making the point that Ayn Rand makes, and that is we criticize those persons who are the top of the food chain as far as the economy is concerned. These people that are extremely wealthy. I don't think they took the wealth from anybody. They produced a product that people wanted and willing to pay for. But those that are extremely wealthy, I'll tell you what Ayn Rand says, and we can see it throughout the world. Wherever that class is absent, you find the kinds of conditions you see in North Korea and that you see in Venezuela. Another part of that, you know, they had we're talking about the Pope here. Another part of that we're talking about Mugabe, but let's talk about Chavez's successor, Maduro. Maduro was saying, since the Pope was chosen out of Latin America, coming out of Argentina, Maduro, who is all but wearing Chavez on his forehead, you know, this shows you how these dictators are. We talk, you know, these dictators that want to show how they are fearless and they're strong men and they have no fear. Maduro this past week in Venezuela was speaking before a crowd, and he said that he's going to go in those slums. Now, we thought that Chavez had, I mean, from what they've been saying about Chavez, we thought he had gotten rid of all the slums. I mean, the poor people were taken care of. There are no slums in Venezuela. But he's going to go in the slums now. He's not going to carry his bodyguards in there. He's not going to have any arms. He's going there barehanded and bare-chested. And he's going to tell these gang members to put down their weapons and come to Christ. And he's going to do that, right? I mean, he's going to go in. Venezuela, by the way, has some of the most valuable. If you think Los Angeles is bad, go outside Caracas. Venezuela, they're talking about what Chavez did for the poor. You can go to Caracas and, okay, that's fine. Go outside Caracas. Venezuela is what Michelle Malkin said. I looked at the numbers. It is hell on earth. If you want to know where hell is on the planet, Venezuela would be a very good bet. There's some other candidates for it as well, but that's one candidate for it. And Chavez was telling that the poor have been taken care of. All these people going down there. Jesse Jackson giving the memorial for Chavez. Sean Penn was there. I don't know if Danny Glover went down there, but I know I know he was broken up over it. And all these people. There's what's that? The filmmaker's name, Oliver Stone, was saying, you did your work. Now take your rest, your well-deserved rest, and blah, blah. And Chavez did this for the poor. Well, what is Maduro? If what they're saying, if what they said is true, then what is Maduro talking about? Where are these slums? I thought we got rid of the slums. And so Maduro raised the question of whether or not Chavez reached from beyond the grave. I mean, he's still machismo. Reached beyond the grave and pushed Rome, which is over there across the ocean, and from heaven, because he went to heaven according to Maduro, and reached into the Vatican and caused Christ to nudge the cardinals to choose a pope from Latin America. The first pope, by the way, that's ever been chosen from the Americas. And so that was all Chavez, if you can believe Maduro. So we got to deal with one clown over here in the Western Hemisphere and a clown over there in the Eastern Hemisphere. And that's Mugabe over there, and we got to deal with Maduro over here, who's telling us that the Pope has to do with Chavez, who's still great even beyond the grave. Well, let me see if I can find something that may give the other side. This is like Paul Harvey here, page 2. And in Time Magazine, I still take it, by the way. I keep talking about it and I keep on taking it, so I must be a glutton for punishment. But in Time Magazine, which is the issue dated March the 25th, and it has on the front cover Pope Francis, the New World Pope. New World Pope because he's from over here. And they got a big picture of him there and talks about, in the article piece, talks about Francis and some of his background. Seems to be a very humble man, riding made a big deal of his riding the subway to work and staying at a lowly place rather than staying in some of the nicer places that would have been set up for his accommodation and things of that sort. So he seems like he is down with the poor. Although I'm not down, I was down with the poor when I couldn't do any better, and now I'm up with the poor because I think that you can be sympathetic to the poor without having to live like you're poor. And I think that, in fact, I think that's a travesty, because if you can model something other than poverty, so that the poor have something to aspire to, I think that you are doing something significant for the poor, because they don't have to stay poor just because they're born into it. But he seems to be a pretty regular.
You
Go ahead.
make an interesting point there. I mean, I think I would like to pick up that point. Some people get like it's almost they're trying to ennoble poverty, and I mean I don't think you should always seek out after filthy lucre. I have issues with that too, but some people try to make it sound like well Jesus was poor, and so you got to be poor, but then I don't see where a world can function where everybody's seeking to be poor. I mean, because let's face it, you depend on. They say, well, it's a good thing to give away good things to good people, to poor people. You got to have somebody having more than they traditionally would need for their own existence to be able to give it away to somebody else. So I mean, it's kind of it creates kind of a paradoxical situation.
Yes, it does. And if you have wealth, you can do greater good. I was on my Facebook wall. There was a back and forth going yesterday, and we were. There's this one person got on a post and wouldn't get off, and I wouldn't get off, and we were going back and forth about this issue of greed. And of course, I'm coming out of Ayn Rand, having read her book and her works. This book that I'm talking about here would be the one that she wrote called "The Virtue of Selfishness," which I think Ayn Rand, kills any argument that you ought to be a sacrificial animal. I think even if Christians are arguing that point, they need to understand their own biblical, principles, because if Jesus was a sacrificial lamb for the world, then they're duplicated. All they need to do now, given the fact that that debt has already been paid, is claim their own sovereignty and allow others to have their sovereignty. You don't need to be a sacrificial animal anymore because we've had that debt paid. If you believe in Christianity, that debt was paid on Mount Calvary. But what I was arguing was that what we were arguing about was the young lady said after so many back and forths that you're not a Christian by what you're saying about greed. I told her greed is not a sin. The Bible says thou should not steal. It doesn't say thou should not be greedy. And I want to make it clear. I want to make it clear to her that greed is the basis of which civilization reverberates. If you don't have greed, then you don't have civility. Because the way greed operates, I know people think it's about you taking something that don't belong to you. That's not greed, that's theft. And if you want to look at it in its legal form, look in Washington. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that this morning I got up and had my usual Folgers cup of coffee and 2 pieces of toast. That meant that I had bread that was there. Well, the guy that made that bread, I bought it yesterday, by the way, and so he made it. Some guy got up on a Saturday morning because the bread was fresh. I bought it Sunday. And that means somebody got up out of the bed Saturday, spent their time baking some bread, and didn't even know who George Moss was. He wasn't selling it because I wanted some bread. I wanted it, but he didn't know that. And I don't think he even cared. But the reason why he got out of the bed, spoiled his Saturday, didn't go golfing with Tiger Woods, that's the president, and went out there to the bakery, got in his car, took out the roller. They don't do it that way, but I'm saying if he was individually doing it. You take out the roller, have the yeast, pour that in there, get all the flour, mix it up, make the bread, package it, put it in the truck, carry it to the stores, and sell it. And why did he do that? You know why he did it, right? He wanted your money. And he was too honest, because he believes in the biblical tenet. That's what she didn't understand. Thou shalt not steal. He ain't stealing. He made some bread. And why did he make the bread? Because he didn't want to steal my money. He wanted to get me to buy the bread. And what did I do? I went and bought the bread, which satisfied his greed. He satisfied my greed. I wanted some bread. So he allowed me to do what then? By my greed being satisfied, guess what happened to me? Because I ate and had a couple of, good slices of bread. That flaxseed bread is really good. That's just a side point. And I went and had the bread. But guess what else I did? By me having the bread already made, it allowed me to go on my job later on this morning, and make more money so that I can buy more bread and also a couple of hamburgers and satisfy my greed, because by the bread being made, I can do some other things. I don't have to worry about making the bread you see, the guy he's making money by being greedy, but his greed also served my needs, and it also served my greed, because I went out and made money that allowed me to make the bread. Without greed, none of that happens. And that's the point that, she didn't understand. I think very few people understand it.
Well, it's like, Adam Smith, his book, Inquire into the Wealth of Nations, that book cannot be fully explained if you don't understand some of the other book he wrote called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And he also talks about, that's the famous quote, it's not by by the good intentions or whatever of the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, or whatever, that you get your light, your bread, or your beer from. It's because they're looking after their own self-interest. And see, people don't understand that. I mean, if we actually embrace this idea that nobody should be greedy, then guess what? All these thrift shops around here that are selling stuff that are no longer needed or wanted by other people would go out of business. They would. It's because we have people saying, "I used to have this, but now I want something different." So they give away the stuff they used to have to Goodwill, Salvation Army, and then they take the money and they sell it to somebody else, and then they take that money and then they use it for the poor people. Basically, anybody who wants to denounce the idea of greed or moving up in the world is denouncing the idea of reality.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really stupid.
John, you hit the nail squarely on the head. I'll tell you, they're talking about that I wasn't being Christian in terms of what I was saying. I'll tell you somebody that is that was not being Christian is President Obama, who was saying that I think at some point in time that you have made enough money. That's coveting. That is coveting your neighbor's wealth, because let the neighbor determine how much wealth is enough by how much production he wants to engage in. I have a chance right now. I'm retired from public school. I can pick and choose my classes, how much I want to extend myself do I want to teach in the summertime and things like that. I want to travel and go around the world a little bit in my retirement years, but I can pick and choose that. But if I want to be more greedy about that, I want to be the one make that decision. It's also another question that came up. Now that we're talking about that, is on Facebook. Because I do a lot of conversating on Facebook, and one guy was saying to me, because I had admitted, John, you read this one because I saw your post. I posted on that a black person called in Rush Limbaugh, and I was saying that my headline on Facebook was a black person calls in the Rush Limbaugh show. But when I got into my text, before telling them what the guy said, I want to first of all tell them why I was listening to Rush Limbaugh. And I said that I was listening to him because I wanted to. And I had to put that down and say that because, first of all, people think that they're going to tell you who you can listen to, who you can vote for. Stacey Dash ran into that. Or what you can think. And the thought police out there trying to, regulate your life. I wanted to say up front that I listened to the Rush Limbaugh show and I heard this black guy call in. And I want to let them know, first and foremost, no one tells me, not on Sunday, not on Saturday, and no other day of the week, who I listen to and who I will not listen to. And so one guy jumped on the post and said, well, you wasting your time. And I told him this, that if I decide, I don't like to waste my time, but if I, in fact, do so, I will choose what I wasted on. And I want to make that very clear. Because you see, you got these people out here who don't understand freedom and think that a person that is productive and continues to be productive and therefore people continue to pay him for the things he's producing. I mean, because what they do, I mean, what is that flat screen TV about? It's about somebody deciding that they could not in the past make a TV set that wears out. I got a TV set in my house right now in my living room. That's been in this. It's a floor model television. I'm not going to change until it wears out, but then they don't wear out. The TVs last forever because they're transistorized and those parts don't burn out anymore. So what some guy did, because he wanted to sell more television. He doesn't want to sell your TV set 20 years ago. He wants to sell your TV set 20 years later in 2013. So what he did was to make a flat screen TV. Then they got one where you can put the TV set on an iPod or whatever that is that they have, and they keep on innovating. Now, why did they do that? Because you got a TV set in a floor model that you bought 20 years ago. It's still working. So why do you have another TV? Because somebody has decided what they're going to do is make a television set that lasts forever. But in order to sell you another TV set, they have to innovate it out of your house. Because if it wears out, that guy making that television set, the word gets around, hey, that's a piece of cheap stuff and nobody wants to buy it. And that guy goes out of business and his greed can't be satisfied. He can't sell any more television sets. He doesn't do it that way. What he does is that he wears it out in your mind by producing a different product that looks different from the one that he sold you 20 years ago. And the TV sets right now do not look like the television set that I got in my living room on the floor, right in that little corner up there. It ain't moving out of there until it goes out and doesn't work anymore. And it's still going strong. The TV set is not the volume. You can turn the volume up, turn it down.
You got the reputation being really, really frugal, though. So.
I have every nickel I spend has a headache, John. They have a headache. I mean, they're talking about a migraine. That Buffalo. I don't know if Buffalo's still a nickel or not, because how many people have nickels in their pockets anymore? We don't like that. We don't like that change, spare change. But that Buffalo on that nickel had a headache by the time I spent it. But I'll tell you one thing I'm getting ready to do now, though, because I read this also today, and that was, John, did you know that they have a menu, what they call a secret menu? Have you read this on on Yahoo this morning. They had a lot of good articles out there, and I check Yahoo out every morning and see what the news is, and I want to put some of the great news stories on Facebook. One of them I put on Facebook today was the one they dealt with in terms of what they call the secret menu. I didn't know, and they're not going to tell you, but if you know, you know, is that McDonald's, for example, and a lot of these other restaurants have an 8-patty hamburger. They call it, it's not a super burger, some name they gave it. And the reason why it's a secret menu is because if that gets out, that they got a hamburger that you could get with 8 pieces of meat, slices of meat with cheese. And there's Bloomberg over there in New York, and there's Congress up there in Washington, and they're saying that you might fall out because you got your arteries clogged up, as if they got anything to do with that. But if you go in and ask for it, then you can get this service of those burgers. Now, I didn't know that. Now, I've been suffering for years and didn't even know it. And that is that I've been going in there getting at Wendy's and these other restaurants getting a double decker hamburger or a Big Mac, thinking I've gotten something, and I could have got 4 times as much and didn't even know it. By the way, when I go in there, I'm going to show everybody in the restaurant that burger so they'll know about it. It won't be a secret anymore. Then I'm going to send a picture of it to Bloomberg over in New York, so you'll know that burger, and I'm going to get a 24-ounce pop with it. Now that the court has turned him back on telling us about how many ounces we can have. I want to get back to what I was saying, though, in terms of the Pope, because this is very important in terms of a new era in the papacy. I mean, there's 1.5 billion people that are in the papacy, and there are reasons why the Pope was chosen in Latin America. But I think there's also a little bit of the politics in terms of that particular Pope being chosen, because many people thought it would probably come out of Brazil, because Brazil has the largest, Brazil and Mexico have the largest number of Catholics in the world. It's only 25% of the Catholics in Europe, by the way. Most of them are and only 10% of the Catholics are in Asia. Most of them are in Latin America, so it makes sense that they would be that a pope would be chosen in the New World and in the Americas and would be chosen here. They're even saying, by the way, those of you who are paying attention to the coronation tomorrow and all lined up for it to watch the festivities, they're even saying that now that we are a third world country, or soon to become that, if we don't get off this train, that we could have a pope here. You don't expect the pope to come out of a superpower, because it looks like you're kind of ganging up, and how can you claim that you're for the masses if you're coming out of these superpower nations? But if we keep going the way we're going, maybe we'll be in line for a pope down the line, because there's some politics involved in it, and as is the case with this pope, because this pope is one generation removed from his his immigrant father and mother, who are immigrants from Europe, by the way. His father and mother were Italian. So the idea that they got away from Europe in terms of this reaching out into the Latin American country, that's kind of like a little bit of the politics of the moment in terms of the decision that was made, because this is not as much third world or the Americas as, first of all, is in fact seen. I mean, it's like it is, and at the same time it's not. That it's a person outside of Europe, and at the same time is not outside of Europe. That is just one generation removed from the European basin. So that's a little bit of the politics involved in it. But if you look at the numbers, you see something else going on here. Let me read these numbers to you. These are some numbers that came up, as I said earlier, in Time Magazine. And don't write and don't call and ask me why am I still taking Time Magazine. I'll let you know as soon as I figure it out, because I'm trying to figure that out myself. In Oceania, there are 9 million people in that particular part of the world, and of that 9 million, 9% of them their growth rate is 9%. So the 5-year growth rate there is 9%. But just listen to these numbers here. North America, there are 85 million Catholics in North America. In North America, they have a growth rate of 5%. In Asia, 130 million, and you can see that would be a small number compared to the numbers we're talking about, because just in 2 countries, we're talking about more than 1 billion in 2 of the countries in Asia, and that's India and China. And they have 130 million Catholics in Asia, and that's a growth rate there of 11%. In Central America, there are 162 million Catholics. The growth rate in Central America is 5%. And in Africa, 186 million, 21% growth rate. And 285 million in Europe, only a 2% growth rate in Europe. And in South America, listen to these numbers right here. Read all those numbers off. In South America, and that's Argentina is in South America, Brazil is in South America, and in South America, where the Pope comes from, not you, Chavez, but look at these numbers that are the determinative here, and that is in South America, 339 million Catholics that are there, and they have a growth rate there of 6%. Let me look at some of the nations in South America, just to give you some more information about that. So you can see that there's method to the madness here. In Brazil, 69% of the people in Brazil are Catholics. In Argentina, 77%. And in Peru, 81%. In Mexico, 85%. Guess what it is here in the United States? In the United States, have any idea, John?
I would say probably about 25%, 30%.
This guy, I tell you, if I can stop him one day, I'm gonna go out and buy myself a Big Mac, one of those super. I'm gonna treat myself to one of those 8-decker sandwiches. 24%. So he's right. So we're gonna say 25%. Say he was right on the mark. I would never have guessed that that number. I knew it when I haven't read it before I came to the studio, but 25% of the 25% of the people here in the United States are Catholic, and you could go on in Mexico. 85% of the people in Mexico. So when they come here, Our Lady Guadalupe and so on, their Mary would be Mexican. The fact is that they come here, and you can see that they would be pretty much in line with those numbers, 24% of the population, and so on. But it makes sense for the Pope to have been chosen outside for a lot of reasons. One is that that's where the growth rate is, and also it makes sense in terms of the outreach, because the Catholic Church, the people in Europe, we got 24% here in the United States. It's only 25% of the Catholics throughout Europe. So that population is in fact dwindling in terms of the base of the Catholic Church. They got to reach out to the larger parts of the world where the numbers are in fact growing, because there's growth rate in Europe, and I don't think they have it. Let's see, Europe's growth rate is 2%, and that's like saying that there is no growth. That 2% is what y'all got your taxes raised in, or in the sequester. 2% is what they did in terms of the projection on how much money they're going to spend in 2013. So those numbers are minimum. And if you can relate to the numbers being minimum in terms of the growth rate of the Catholic Church, you can see there's minimum in terms of, listen, Mr. President, you can see that it's also minimum in terms of the sequester. So you can open up the White House right now.
Yeah, see, another thing is, too, this president, maybe I haven't kept track, maybe it's the press, because I don't keep track of presidential movement so much. But the press, which is very favorable usually to Obama on everything, they don't seem to pick his stuff as much. He seems to be spending a lot of money on vacations that the other presidents never did.
John, last year, that family cost the taxpayers $1.4 billion.
This is ridiculous. In lean economic times we're all facing, this man seems totally oblivious to all the crap he's saying on one hand and then doing totally the opposite on the other.
Did you hear what he said last week?
No.
That about the deficit? That he has no intention of bringing the deficit under control. This man was talking about how it's unpatriotic when Bush was running up a deficit, which was a deficit of $4 trillion over the course of 8 years. This president did that in 1 year, did more than that in 1 year. $6 trillion in 1 year. And now that we're going towards $17 trillion in deficit spending, he's now saying that he has no intention of reducing the deficit or even being concerned about it.
I think he's like basically saying, hey, I know it's too hard for me to deal with. I've never dealt with anything like this before. I got elected because I was a good-looking guy and popular. You expect me to actually do something. How dare you? I'm a good-looking guy. Michelle's a good-looking woman. How dare you expect anything from me?
Yeah, it's amazing that what's happening though with the media is that I was looking at one of his cheerleaders, George Stephanopoulos, who I think should have pom-poms every time they interview the president. It's like, you're throwing, it's a big softball, they're just tossing it up there, making sure that, Mr. President, here it comes, and make sure you get the bat ready, and you can't miss it. But I was looking at an interview the other day, and there was something different going on. It wasn't like they were throwing the ball, a speed ball to the president, but it wasn't that big softball either. And I think that's because the president is so far out there now. They're finally getting to the point where it's more difficult to cover for the president because everybody's been talking about how they are out here covering for the president and cheerleading for the president, pom-poms, all that. And he's making it more difficult because people are looking at what they're saying, and they're noticing they're not holding him to the same account that they held Bush for. And many of them are turning off. Mark Levine calls them MSLSD, talking about MSNBC. And, people are turning those guys off and they're going toward Fox. That's just what it's not that I'm endorsing Fox. I'm just saying that's where they're going. Because at least with Fox, they can get the other side. Where in the MSLSD, I'm not going to call him MSLSD as Mark Levine does, but I do know what he's talking about, and certainly with Chris Matthews and those persons over there, and Al Sharpton. But in what he's talking about is you only get this one view, and it's just a constant bombardment of falsified information where they're not holding government to account.
I get so tired of liberals saying that too. And I mean, I am in the middle in between a lot of stuff. I'm a libertarian, so I'm for drug legalization, prostitution legalization, which is not definitely on the right, politically. Not even on the left, actually, though. So, but I'm so tired of them whining, and I'll use the term bitching about Fox News, Fox News, Fox News. Well, it's like you got ABC, CBS, NBC, ABC. How many other news agencies? Everybody's got to be on board for perceiving reality and not then covering the same stories. Where's the diversity of thought? Yeah, you want diversity. You just want different skin colors, but you want everybody to think alike and act alike. Okay,
John, that is amazing, isn't it? That they would have all the others in the tool shed. Everybody else is in here, manning the store, making sure that the Democratic Party and the administration is made to look good in front of the public. We're not going to hold anybody accountable. We're not going to raise Benghazi, for example. We're going to certainly not call for an investigation like we did in Watergate back in 1972. We're not going to do any of that. But there's one station out here that's outside of the circuit, and they act like they can't stand to have one network out of all the consortium of networks that's out here. We're doing what? They're out there nurturing the presidency and throwing these softball questions up there. It's like they need to get a room.
It's disgusting. Did you hear Ed Schultz is now just going to weekends, okay, on the channel he's on? But I've read some quotes, and I don't pay attention to them. One of Tom Sumner's friends did a piece that he used to play when he did a show here about why he hated Ed Schultz. He hated Ed. I hate Ed. And he goes on about it. He did. And I was reading some of these excerpts, and I found out that this guy that Tom Sumner had this piece on, saying why he hated Ed Schultz. This guy was accurate. He just goes on to diatribes, calling people names.
Yeah.
And where is this objectivity the journalists are supposed to have?
It shows he's on the weekends now.
He's going to just go on weekends. Ed Schultz not going to have his daily show. He's just going to be on weekends. They're reducing his exposure. And I'm amazed. I mean, Rush Limbaugh says stuff, but he is not a journalist. He's a commentator. All these other people are making, like Rachel Maddow, all these people make horrific slams, and they're supposed to be journalists. And then the other day, somebody posted on Being a Liberal thing about Rachel Maddow. She graduated college. She had a double major. And then they had like Sean Hannity, and they had all these other guys who were conservatives, dropped out of college. And guess who's their better source? And I even responded. I spent most of my adult life around educational systems, secondary education and beyond. And just because somebody is college educated doesn't make them a better person.
No.
Doesn't make them a smarter person. Makes them probably more an indoctrinated person.
John, you're making some excellent points. One of the articles has been coming out. One of the articles that came out last week, it was a series of articles by Thomas Sowell, who has a new book out called Intellectuals and Race. And one of the things he talks about in those articles, I think there are 4 of them in number right at this point, is that the intellectuals have been some of the major problems in these societies. The article, part 3 of that series, was saying that many people think that most of the discriminatory conduct has come from the lower elements in that in terms of oppression and discrimination, things of that sort. He was talking about the number of people that have brought about discriminatory kinds of conduct that are into intellectual groups, the ones that were in the eugenics movements and things like that. These were highly educated people. And when you look at their track record, and in fact, he made this point about the major things that has been discriminatory and also that's brought about Holocaust and things of that sort have been those who have been successful. He talked about how it's been the Jews in Europe, the Armenians in the Ottoman Empire, and the Chinese in Asia. Those numbers pale in comparison to the blacks that were lynched in this country, for example. They weren't lynched because of their race or their gender. They were lynched because they were successful. And look what happened to them. And they did. And he said that happened in 1 year compared to what happened all throughout the time that blacks have been in the United States. It gives you some perspective on the numbers is what I'm saying.
The Nazis, to use that boogeyman, the leadership of the Nazi Party were some of the best educated people in the planet at that time.
Oh, yes.
At that time, there's some of the best education doesn't mean you always have the grasp of reality, and it's sometimes you get so caught up in facts and figures, you reduce it to that and destroy the human element that's supposed to be in the consideration. Probably the foremost.
Look at Woodrow Wilson, who was highly educated and was the president of Princeton University. Look at what he did in the White House. And there's this guy that was in the Obama administration. He's back now at the University of Chicago, named Austin Goolsbee. And look at this. I mean, every time I listen to this guy on the air, he frightens me. And I don't think I can sit in this classroom. But and in fact, I read some of this guy's writings. He's talking about when he was in the economic advisor to the president. This guy was talking about organizing the people in the penal institution and unionizing that workforce because they were being exploited, blah, 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 as if they're supposed to go in there and get, soap and water and bed and breakfast. Bed and breakfast, what you pay for when you're going hunting or something. But and we're supposed to foot the bill, and they're not supposed to do anything. He wanted to unionize those workers. This is how out to lunch this guy is. No, the intellectual class. And they're intellectuals because they are the ones that deal with ideas. They've oftentimes been on the wrong side of history, and many of the catastrophes in the world can be attributed to that element, which continues to be. We need to look at that element among probably more so among the others. Nothing to see there. Well, we have to. I get a chance, as always. I didn't get a chance to do everything I want to do. I was going to bring something in here about what we're doing with our constitutional thrust in terms of the Constitutional Convention. We'll do that at a later time. We are making some progress here and want to report to you next time, probably at the very beginning of the program. We won't get sidetracked about how that is going, because I'm elated over the progress we're making, and I think we are going to be able to pull this off. It's going to take some time to do it, but we're going to pull this off, and we are going to have our Constitutional Convention, or the world's going to want to know why we didn't do it. We want you to, in the listenership and the viewership of FlintTalkRadio.com, to stay tuned to all of the programs here. And if you've seen something different in how the program comes across on Ustream, it's because we have 2 new cameras in the studio. And those cameras are picking up a different image. And we can go in and out, zoom back and forth, and all of these things these cameras will do. And as if we didn't have enough cameras here already. And so we're going to have a new look now, and want you to just stay tuned, because we are going to continue to grow and develop our resources here at FlintTalkRadio.com. Until next time, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.